Hey, beautiful soul. You're listening to the Rising into Mindful Motherhood podcast, your weekly dose of fertility wisdom. I'm your host, Dr. Katie Wood. I'm a barefoot mama bear, pharmacist, and integrative fertility coach. This is your go-to podcast for all things to naturally nourish your fertility, embody womb healing, and reclaim your feminine power to accelerate your path to pregnancy. My expert guests and I will be having intentional conversations to discuss the many facets of a thriving, fertile foundation, natural wellness, and how we grow and transform as women on our journey to motherhood. So let's dive in, shall we? Hello and welcome to Rising into Mindful Motherhood. In this episode, I'll be talking with Kate Toye, a self-compassion coach who helps women, more specifically entrepreneur mamas, be more self-compassionate by understanding where their inner critic, negative self-talk, and limiting core beliefs come from so they can trust themselves, stop with the imposter syndrome, and unconditionally love themselves and create the business and the family life that they envision on their terms. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing self-compassion, self-awareness, healing childhood wounds through the lens of fertility, why it's important to start now if you're in that fertility phase or wherever you are in your motherhood journey. It is never too late. So you're going to be in for a treat for this episode. So welcome, Kate. Super excited to have you here today.
Wow, thank you so much, Katie. It is lovely to be with you. And I just want to say, listening to your podcast, I honor what you do. And a part of my being just really I felt my heart reach out as I was listening
Mhm.
to you
Thank
sharing
you.
about people's journeys and the journey that you take women on that are struggling with infertility. And
Thank
my
you so much.
goodness, what a struggle.
Yes, yes, it can be, but I think it's all here for a reason, right? I really, truly, truly believe that. So, what came through for me as I was getting ready to hop on with you is I'd love to talk about what is this inner critic, negative self-talk, limiting core beliefs? What exactly are these? How can they present? And I ask because when I really began my inner personal healing journey, when these things were brought up, I really had no idea what they were, what they meant. Did I have that? How do I find if I have these things? Like that awareness just wasn't even there. So I imagine if I felt that way, some other people might be thinking the same thing. So I would love to just start there. Like, what are these terms that we're going to be talking about today?
What an absolute beautiful question. So, what I love to share, I love sharing about the inner critic. I love sharing about childhood. I love sharing about trauma, period. I think that understanding ourselves through the lens of what happened to me and what did I make it mean, instead of the lens of what's wrong with me, really
Mm,
allows us a compassionate place to really get curious about ourselves without pointing any fingers, because everybody was raised by somebody who was raised by somebody who was raised by somebody, and on it goes. And I am a huge believer. I can honestly say this through my soul, and I don't know that I could at one point, that I truly believe that people are doing the absolute best that they can with what they have, what they know, and where they're at any given time. And of course, when we look back on our past and think, God, why didn't I do this or that? Or why did I do this or that? I didn't have the eyes then that I have now, right? That's who I was at that point in my journey. And now I'm at a completely different place. So I love that you ask about the inner critic, because that is such a beautiful insight for me. Because the world that I live in, I think that people are just really aware of, oh, there's my inner critic showing up. So, inner critic, sometimes we can be so connected, or it's been with us for so long, or it's served us, and I do the air quotes, served us in a way that we might not even look at that as an inner critic. So, for me, for sure, I was a perfectionist, hardcore. And I really loved that, right? A part of me really loved that. I felt that's how I got things done. That's how my house stayed clean. That's how it was just, I really, who would I be if I didn't have that? And then as I started to do more and more of my own work and unpack things, as they say, I realized that it wasn't the best sensations in my body when my perfectionist would take over. It didn't talk kindly to me when my would take over. My head could be nonstop chatter with like, why did you say this when you said that? Why didn't you do this way? What did you think was going to happen? You know better than this. And also this beautiful insight from my daughter, who has, I love that our kids get to witness our healing journey as well, because I think that is huge growth for them too. But as things started to change and I mean, I think I was doing pretty good back in the day, but as things started to change, she said, why did you think when it was time when you were getting ready for Christmas and everyone was coming over, we would take off and go to our rooms? And my internal dialogue was, oh, you're alone again. And here you are doing everything and no one's helping you, which might be an inner critic. But what really was happening was it was so uncomfortable for everybody else that they just left. And I mean, they were small, right? She was probably 7, 9, somewhere around there, and 12. And so, what an inner critic is, I would just offer, I do an exercise whenever I do workshops, and it's a self compassion exercise from Kristen Neff. Just take a gauge of how you talk to yourself when you're struggling compared to how you would talk to a really good friend when they're struggling,
Mhm.
and how different that internal, what's your body language, which words do you use? Do you say things like, God dang, you said you'd never be here again, and here you are. How come you're so stupid? How come you don't know better? That is your inner critic.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I love that example is how just looking at how are you talking to yourself compared to how you would talk to other people. And probably 9 times out of 10, you wouldn't talk to a friend in that way. So I think that that's a really good awareness gauge for anyone who is really curious about how this could be presenting for them. I do feel like sometimes when we're growing up, we're seeing how maybe our mom is looking at herself and presenting with herself. I didn't experience this myself, but I know that this can be common where maybe your mom looks at herself in the mirror and says, "Oh, I have to lose 10 pounds. I can't eat X, Y, or Z anymore, or I need to go on a diet tomorrow," or whatever it is. And you learn from that. You get imprinted subconsciously, and maybe that's how you begin to look at yourself as well.
Yeah, exactly. Beautiful example. And also, if my mom, for that example, whoever that is, if the message is my mom isn't worthy because she carries a few more pounds,
Mhm.
or however we want to say that, she's not happy with the way she's looking in the mirror, so she doesn't feel she's worthy. What kind of messaging is that unknowingly giving to me? Or what am I connecting self-worth as a human to something external?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think when we stop and pause and really think about what went on when we grew up, there's so many pauses that we can just take and really think about what might I have made that mean, right? Not what's wrong with me. What might I have made that mean? Another example that I use is a mom that might says, your crying is making me really sad. Be happy for mommy. Be happy for mommy. And I mean, I feel that weight in my body of a little person starting to believe that they are emotionally responsible for the big people in their life. And my goodness, how much of a burden is that? And then
Mhm.
we see grown women who are people pleasers, have no boundaries, killing themselves for external validation, and also thinking that that person's mad. It must be something I did.
Mhm. Yeah, I see that often coming up in the fertility journey, wanting to people please and really just stretching yourself so thin to do all the things, and you want to get pregnant so badly. So that just adds another layer of stress. And then I think another example of an inner critic is just you can't even get pregnant, right? You're a woman and you can't even get pregnant. The one thing that you are made to do. I know that was a big one for me, sure, when we were struggling. And then the limiting beliefs, I'm never going to get pregnant. It's not going to happen for me. It's happening for her, not for me. That's also a big one too.
And maybe even what's wrong with me comes into that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I just love a space of pause and to just really connect with where might you feel that in your body as you and I are talking. And maybe these
Mm,
words are connecting somewhere in your body, like maybe this is hitting in your stomach, or maybe you're aware of a tension in your shoulder blades, or maybe it's catching in your throat. And to just the body is so wise. The body tells us things that our head just can't. Our head tells us things like it wasn't that bad. It happened one time. Other people have it worse. And our body says, hey, there's something here.
mhm. Yeah, that is part of what I teach my clients too. When we're in these moments of maybe some strong emotions and thoughts are coming through, is sitting with yourself and finding where is that contraction or restriction in the body and just, taking a pause and breathing into that space. And it's really powerful once you learn how to do this. And really, you can release a lot of this like stagnant, negative, dense energy and emotion that you've probably been holding on to since you were a little girl, really.
And that's my way of thinking is that not everything is connected to trauma. And I do honestly believe we are all on the spectrum of trauma. And if
Mm-hmm.
I can understand what happened to me through the lens of what happened to me, that could be traumatic. And something that could be traumatic to my system might not necessarily be traumatic to your system,
Hmm.
right? We're completely wired as we are wired. And I think so much is related to trauma that we don't even think of. Maybe that is the key that's going to unlock a different way to understand myself.
Hmm. Yeah. And speaking of trauma, I know this was big for me just because I didn't know, I wasn't aware, but trauma doesn't have to be this big thing like physical or sexual or anything like that. It can really be so small and you just
Right.
don't even know. Like maybe your parent promised that they would go to a tournament or a competition or something, and then they didn't show up, right? That sense of abandonment can be really, really big. And I feel like abandonment can come through with fertility, either from just feeling abandoned by your baby not coming through. Maybe your partner isn't being super supportive, or maybe you have family members that are just like, well, maybe it's just not in the cards for you to have children, or even doctors too, depending on how they're being supportive of you in your journey as well.
Mm. And I love the tie-in as well to that could connect to this perception of abandonment is trauma is also what should have happened and didn't. When our parents can't show up for us, how we need them to show up for us.
Mm-hmm.
When a baby is left to cry in a crib, that really was the teachings of doctors for a long time that quote a baby could self-soothe, and a baby has no way to self-soothe. What actually happens is the system stops the crying because it's either cry and die or preserve energy and live. And that wasn't an understanding that many people might have grown up with. And parents, moms might have really felt that pull to their baby, but they were trying to do what the doctor said was right and let the baby cry.
Mm-hmm.
And so that could be pre-verbal that we don't even understand in ourselves. Might be no one's coming for me. I'm all
Mm-hmm.
alone in the world. I have to take care of myself, even though I have no way of doing so. And that might show up as well if you're feeling this perception of abandonment.
Yeah. Yeah, and what just came through when you were saying that is remothering or reparenting ourselves. Do you speak to that at all?
Oh, yes. I think that's all the work that I do. I
Yeah. Using our four-step restorative fertility framework, we will, one, reveal the physical and energetic root cause. Two, we will remove the barriers to you conceiving and carrying a pregnancy to term. Number three, we will rebalance the physical and energetic body with bio-individual strategies. And number four, receive. You will nourish the mind, body, and spirit so you can receive baby. I have 3 one-on-one spots, and this is for the woman who is ready to claim her fertility back. She's ready to step back into her power. She is ready to do what it takes to finally get pregnant. If you want to learn more about this, find me on Instagram at @the_wellness_pharmacist. My Instagram is going to be in the show notes.
honestly believe that's all the work that I do is reparenting ourselves. And really now I'm at a place where I can say I unconditionally love my mom, unconditionally. And I don't, I know I couldn't have said that forever in my journey. And I get it. She was doing the very best that she could. I mean, this wasn't language that our moms had. People didn't talk about trauma like we talk about it now, me all day long, right? Like this is, and I love that this is where we are in this place of understanding that I get to be curious about myself and I get to look at there's so what I find is so wonderful too is all these ways that are coming online of healing, right?
Yeah.
And that this might work for me for a while, or even what I'm thinking now is this kind of healing really connected to a part of me and that feels complete. And now, oh, look, there's this that now connects to this part of me, and that now feels, and now this, right? I've gone through many energy, spiritual, mental, physical, like all of it. And I get to pick and I love it. I love where I am that we get to pick and choose what works for us. But
Mhm.
yes, reparenting ourselves, I think, is really all the work that I do. And how can I show up for me? Because me, grown me, I can show up for little me.
Mhm.
Right? Little me, you don't have to do that anymore. Because my understanding is a part of me that's really young when things get intense or I'm feeling, quote, shame or guilt. This much younger part of me tries to step in and says, I know how to deal with this. I've dealt with this forever. But when we really look at it, it's my goodness, you're 5. You don't have to be the emotional support here for anybody.
Mhm.
I've got the system.
Yeah. I would love to dive a little bit deeper into reparenting in case it's new for anyone that's listening. What does that look like? And I can, after you share your thoughts, I can share an example of some reparenting I did for myself too.
Beautiful, beautiful. So the work I do, I'm a compassionate inquiry practitioner, and that's a work of Gabor Mate. And that's really about, he wrote The Body Keeps the Score, The Myth of Normal
Mm.
in the Realm of Hungry
Yes, I need
Ghosts.
to read that book. I haven't read that book yet.
Oh, yes, 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 yes. And that's really going all the way back to where do you feel it in your body? And it's so incredible where you feel it in your body. What is emotion are you aware of here? And then what I find so often is a memory comes up for people that they might not even have known was in there somewhere. And I think it's because we're connecting with the body. And then we get with that memory and the scene is painted and then what might that have been like for a child, that X, Y, and Z? And people can see that a part of them might go to this place where, but my parents were so tired, or my parents worked so hard, or my, and yes, and can you picture a 4-year-old? Can you see how small they are? If that was your 4-year-old, what would they need? And it just gives this completely different lens of, oh my God, I was so small. I didn't understand. And so then, and now what does that 4-year-old need? And
Mhm.
how can you be with that 4-year-old? So that's part of reparenting. And then I also love to do internal family systems work. And that's this idea that we're all parts
Mm,
and all parts are welcome. And so there's a part of me that needed, what did that part need? And let's hear from that part. And really, I think that might be where our inner critic comes in, right? There's a part of me that wants this to be perfect. And there's a part of me
mm,
also that wants to just be able to have a lot of fun here. And those two might push and pull, right? There's a part of me that I don't care if somebody, oh, my thing is my fridge, right? A part of me wants to just be okay with somebody opening my fridge and it not looking like nobody lives in the house, as my kids say. And the other part of me is, God dang, I really want that fridge to be like immaculate. And these two parts might push and pull. And so let's get curious about both of these parts want what's best for me, right? But they're not even aware of self because they're a much younger part.
mm, mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I love that. And some tips that, and I know you're going to share, so I love that, but some tips that I share for people that I work with is find a picture of yourself when you were small
Yeah.
and look at that. Because my belief is you're born here absolutely perfect. We all arrive here absolute brilliance and perfection. And then life happens and we all come back to that place. And I really believe that that perfection is still inside of us, right? Radiating out
Mm,
this just
yeah.
pureness. And so I love having, I have pictures of my mom when she's small around my house and pictures, any anybody in my life that I can have a picture of when they're young, I put it up because my God, those beautiful pieces are still in us.
Hmm. Yeah, just remembering we were all
Right.
that
We
young
were
and
all of
innocent.
that.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And I love the piece where you share too on if a memory does come up and you're seeing yourself as a small child and thinking of it, especially this is a fertility podcast, thinking of it as if you at that age, if that was your child, how would you comfort them? And I love tying in that piece because I think it brings in this aspect of this inner maternalness
Mm.
that we have. And I think it strengthens that muscle, but then also I in the subconscious mind thinking, even just thinking, how would I parent my child? So even just putting that idea out into the world, out into the universe, that this is how I would show up as a mother for my child. I think that that is so powerful for anyone who is struggling on their fertility journey, especially if you don't have any kids yet, because you don't know
Right.
exactly how you don't have any experience doing that yet. So even just getting curious about how would I show up for my child in this particular situation, I think that I just love that so much. But an experience I had was there's this memory came up. I was probably 5 or 6, crying, upset. My sister was telling me to stop crying. And in the reparenting that I gave myself, it was just it's okay to be sad. You can be sad in this moment and it's okay to cry and just giving her that permission. And by the end of it, the new memory I basically created in my mind was little Katie was happy. She was
Right.
fine. She got it out and then she was fine. So it can be relatively simple, I
Mm.
think, to just shift the perspective and yeah, just like shifting the energy, I guess, and the note of that experience.
Yeah, and I love your example. And there's a couple of things that I'd love to touch on in the example. One is a core belief that might have come from that is you're too much or you're not enough, right?
Mm,
Your
mhm.
crying is, oh my God, you're too
Yeah.
much, or you're not enough. I'm crying and no one's seeing me, hearing me, validating my reality.
Hmm.
And then another thing that you said, which I think is so, actually, there's another one after that as well, is that we can't go back and change the past, but we can go back and change our relationship to the past. Right? I
Hmm.
can go back and I can change what I made that mean. Actually, what I made that mean is I really need to be nurtured and held. And can I go back and nurture and hold myself? And what do I need? Maybe you just need a hug. Can you feel you on your lap? Can you
Hmm.
feel you holding you? Can you see your eyes? And can that wee one feel you now? And then another thing you said is that it's relatively simple. And I would love to say that it can be simple, but it isn't always easy.
Yeah. Hmm. Yes,
Mm.
absolutely true. Hmm.
And there's so many layers that can be, and I speak with people that, I mean, people go through horrific things. People witness
Yeah.
horrific things. People see horrific things. Horrific things happen to people, right? And so, whatever that inner critic, and this is another thing that I totally believe, it's trying to do what it does to keep us safe.
Hmm.
And if we're unconscious about it, we don't get to we don't get to repair and make a different relationship with this inner critic so that it doesn't have to do what it's doing in the way that it's doing it. It gets to do what it really wants to do. Usually, our inner critic wants to be our biggest fan, right? It wants to be cheering us from the ceilings. Woo! As opposed to, God, why'd you do that again? Because really, it's just trying to help us not do that again. But it can help us in such a profound, healthy way compared to this nonstop track in our head that just beats us up. I mean, I remember getting woken up at 2 in the morning, like, why did you do it that way? What if they thought this? What if they think you meant that when you said this? And especially being a mom, another thing I remember at the end of the day, not celebrating what went right, but
Hmm.
really sitting in how I didn't show up for my kids. Because that's another thing that I think is so vital. And I know, I mean, I could talk all day about this, but another thing that I think is so important for people is I was reading all the books. Right? I was reading all of the books, all of early brain development, attachment theory. I got it in my head. But when push came to shove and tensions were high and my kids were being kids and my system was elevated, I that wasn't coming through. I was showing up how I didn't want to show up, right? The reason why I was reading all the books. But I was so unconscious of what was buried that I hadn't recreated a relationship with all of my parts. And so the part that was like, this is getting tense, or that, and this could be elevated, or this could look like yelling, or this could look like just ways I didn't want to be a mom, but it was how I was showing up. And
Hmm.
then at night, I would lay in bed and cry. You're reading all the books. You know better. Why are you doing this? You don't even deserve these kids. All of that.
So much conditioning to
Much conditioning.
unravel. It really is. And I mean, it's my daughter's 5, and it's so easy to just go back into maybe the ways that you were parented that you don't want to do. But yeah. So, well, speaking of that, we were talking about how in the moment you're just unconscious about how you're even, it just happens without our
Awareness.
brains even like having to think, just like breathing and our heart beating. It's crazy. But I would love to end with just helping any of the listeners. How can they begin to increase awareness,
Mm.
increase self-compassion? I feel like we had the really, really good tip of maybe if you can catch just a little piece of that inner dialogue and ask yourself, is that how I would talk to a family member, a friend, my partner? I think that's a great start. But like any other thoughts or tips that you
You
have
bet.
on that?
So, what I would also offer is if you find yourself catching yourself talking negatively to yourself,
Mm.
don't shame and blame yourself,
Hmm.
right? Go into, hey, this is, now I'm aware of how I don't even have to think about it. And this is what comes up. So, system, we're trying a new way now. We're flexing a new muscle. We're practicing a new way. We're going to work on being kinder to ourselves. And what I really want listeners to know is the way out is the way through. And now I am present with my kids. I am aware of that, whatever that was doesn't take over. My head is silent most of the time. and to not give up on understanding yourself, to not give up on the journey. It can sound on paper really simple, but it's
Mhm.
not easy because we're going all the way back in to scary places, right? Where we were alone. And that's really why I love community of healing or working with somebody, is that we were alone in that hurt. And now we can be with somebody as we go back and excavate and get curious about the hurt.
Mhm.
So some easy tips. I have like I said with you, a 7-set reset on my website that people can sign up for. But some really easy tips are: practice touching your hands together. This really gets you out of your head and just awareness to your body. Some people aren't even aware that they have a body. It wasn't safe to have a body. Keeps me
Mhm.
safe to stay in my head. So some good practices are just touching hand to hand, rubbing your hands on your thighs. That really brings you into presence and into the
Mhm.
body. Taking note of how you speak with yourself and how you speak to yourself, right? At the end of the night, celebrate your wins, right? At the end of the day, 3 things that I'm really grateful for and I showed up for how I wanted to, as opposed to the list of the ways I didn't. You're a human. Part of being human is that you're imperfect. You are perfectly imperfect. And that we sometimes hold this space of it's okay for others to be human, but not okay for us to be human. And then a really beautiful practice is, I would offer, get a picture of yourself out when you were
Mhm.
small and put it beside your bed or put it where you're going to see it somewhere every day and just really look into that little one's eyes. And then when you look into the mirror, those eyes are still the same eyes. And
That's
something
beautiful.
that I think is a beautiful reflection, I really work on ancestral trauma as well, like generational. We were in our mom when she was in our gran. So I was an egg developing inside my mother, inside my grandmother. So whatever my grandmother was going through, or my energy of her, or what her life was like, that is in here too. So sometimes the things might not make sense because that doesn't really make sense for me. However, you were an egg inside your gran, and maybe something has rippled through from there as well. We get all of the gifts of all of our ancestors. I talk a lot about cycle breakers. We're cycle
Mhm.
breaking at this point. And also, we get a lot of other stuff from our ancestors too. But I believe we're
Absolutely.
here for a reason, right?
Mhm.
You're here for a reason right this moment. And imagine being the cycle breaker for all the generations to come, or at least making it easier for all the generations to come.
Mhm. Absolutely. I talk about that all the time. And I think you had mentioned it earlier on. We are just in this like awakening in this moment. Our parents didn't talk about trauma and all of these things like we now so openly talk about, and there's just so many people educated in it and ready to support and empower so many people. So yeah, it's a very charged and activating moment in time right now. And I just always invite anyone, whether you're trying to get pregnant, you're pregnant now, maybe you're in the thick of motherhood right now, just if you get an inner nudge to just go deeper, listen to that. It's there for a reason. I am 110% a cycle breaker in my family. So many things learned and unlearned for sure. And I think a lot of us are being called and awakened in this time that we're living in right now. So just trusting that inner nudge and in seeking the support of someone like Kate or anyone who is just willing and educated and able to help you because you don't have to do this alone, right?
You do not have, there are so many healers in this world
Hmm.
at this moment. I think it's a profound time in our world as well. And one of my teachers, she didn't say it about this specifically, but I think it resonates, is, and you said one nudge, and it might be at first, it's like a stone, right? It's like this nibbly bit, but this nibbly bit is now turning into a rock, is now turning into a boulder, is now I could have for so long put up with this, but now this it's so huge, it's taken over my life and I have to address it.
Hmm. Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to see that we're the common denominator in any room that we go in. If I go into this room and I feel like everyone's blaming me, maybe there's a part of me that really wants to understand where this blame comes from and what it's about.
I love that. Yeah. So just getting curious about that too. Hmm.
And it's so powerful. It's nothing, it's not about anybody else. I call it, I don't know if you can swear on here, but I call it
Yeah.
I call it the shitty ended double stick. It's really crappy what happened to me potentially. And it's really crappy that it's on me to heal it. However, I'm so glad it's on me because if I was waiting for whoever took me apart to put me back together, I'd still be waiting.
Hmm.
Right? It's really empowering that I get to be the one that says, this is my journey. I don't have to
Hmm.
wait for anybody to apologize, acknowledge anything. I get to get curious about me.
Yeah. Yeah. You hold the control and you get to make that decision and
Yeah.
choice for yourself. Amazing. Well, I think that is just the perfect place to end on that beautiful note. And please share where they can find you, learn more, and connect with you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. My website is just katetoye.com. I'm on Facebook, Kate Toye Self Compassion, Instagram, like not really, Kate Toye Self Compassion Coach. And I have a podcast that I don't offer the love that I so want to, but it's called BS We Women Tell Ourselves. And I love sharing over there. And I'd love to have you over there too, Katie.
Oh, amazing. Yes. I
Yeah.
love doing podcast swaps. Those are always fun. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Kate. This was just a really soft and nurturing episode, and I'm just so excited for the listeners to be able to dive in.
Thank you so much. And thank you for allowing me to share with your audience. I'm honored.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Rising into Mindful Motherhood podcast. If this episode resonated with you or gave you an aha moment, stop what you're doing right now and write a review. This simple act of kindness helps me get this podcast out to connect with as many women as I possibly can. I also have a special offer. If you send me a screenshot of your review, I will take $250 off one of my premium coaching containers. Let me know what resonated with you the most and why. So connect with me in my free Facebook community or tag me on Instagram. You'll find both listed below. Thanks again from the bottom of my heart for tuning in to this episode, and I'll see you next time.